main idea of this section of our course is that we can communicate ideas visually. And one of the biggest tools that we have when we're talking about slides or even infographics is the way we lay out the elements on the page. And our message for this particular video is that the visual layout of slides can communicate a message even without words or pictures. And we have a huge range of different ways we can take the different elements, the different parts or pictures or word blocks that we want to, and how we arrange them, and we can help tell a story just from that arrangement. And I want to show you what that looks like. So here's our first picture here, and it's got these 3 different boxes. What sort of visual message is conveyed? Well, we've got here this tiny little one in the back. That's the distant past, and we're showing a time progression here. And so we can communicate the idea of a time progression to a large fraction of our audience without even having any words, without having even any pictures. Let's try another. So here there are 3 ideas stacked vertically. Well, we have a vertical hierarchy. And the whole meaning of hierarchy is that there's things on top that are the more important things that are up there, and the lower down you go, the less important. By contrast, take a look at this one. When we have 2 elements side by side, they're on the same level, and they scream out, "Compare me." Side-by-side elements are suggesting a side-by-side comparison. Similarly, if we've got 3 ideas all side by side and each one maybe has labels, this might be a way that we would articulate that there are 3 types of things, and here they are. And of course, just like the side-by-side comparison, they're all 3 equal things, and we are invited to compare them and to think about what the differences are between them. And so this is a great way to introduce labeled categories. Another side by side, but this one's a little bit different. This time we've got an arrow connecting the 2 elements. That screams to us cause and effect. Another way we can illustrate the relationship between multiple pictures is with a zoom in box, and that reveals details and allows us to see both big picture and smaller scale things. So let's go ahead and give a try to using these tools of layout with some slides that I found on the internet. So this one's kind of a straight up text heavy slide, the theory of moon formation, and it's got these 3 different ideas about how the moon formed. And so I think I've articulated what's the point of this slide is that we need to say that there are 3 competing models of how the moon formed. And to do that, we want to make sure we have a sentence headline with a clear main message, bold, left justified at the top there. And then what we've done is we've taken our 3 different theories and we've put them on equal footing with each other at the same level. So we have this 3 equal ideas layout. The next thing that we did is we eliminated all the bullet symbols. They're just extra little dots that are in there that just visually distract from things. Now we have white space to mark the differences between our ideas. But we can do better than this one here. We can add visual hierarchy, increase the visual hierarchy by making the big ideas bigger and the smaller details shown in a smaller font. And then, of course, since we're talking about visual communication, the last thing that we should try and do is really amp up the visual communication. So try and illustrate what we're trying to say in words here with pictures as well, so that the words and the pictures complement each other. And so when you do that, hopefully you're starting to see that you can get a clearer picture of the 3 models just at a glance. You can see there's 3 blocks. You can see what each model is. We've got all the details that we had in the original, but it's much more inviting for somebody to look at. Let's try another one. Why is Arctic methane a problem? And so we've got some pictures here. We've got a bunch of text that goes alongside. There's a lot going on here. How could we simplify this? Well, we need to know not just the question. The first thing we should do is we should think about what our main message is, which is going to be the answer to that question. And that answer is ice trapped in methane can be a strong greenhouse gas. And so what I've done is I've taken that picture of ice and I've shown us a chain of cause and effect. Trapped methane escapes when ice melts. That methane in the air is a greenhouse gas, and that leads to global warming. And I actually have all of the same details that were in that bulleted list on the left. And when we do that, we end up with all the details. But at a glance, you can get that chain of cause and effect just by seeing it. All right, let's try another system here. Let's look at sinkholes. And this is just somebody threw this together. They put up some nice pictures of sinkholes. All these are really interesting and exciting pictures of sinkholes. But what's our message? it appears that we're trying to show here about sinkhole formation. That's what figure 18 was. How could we show that process, that time sequence, that time progression? Well, we've got that in our arsenal. We have the time progression layout. And so we could say sinkholes form when water soaks into the soil. And so we can start with what it looks like at the beginning, the middle, and the end, and show that time progression. But maybe we've lost something. Maybe we should be, instead of just doing that, maybe we should show this as the diagram, the block diagrams of what's going on in the subsurface, because maybe that's more important to us, even though the other one was kind of visually easier to follow. This one here gets at the details. Or we could try and see if we can put them both in there together, and this might be a little bit too busy, but if you compare this version here to the one that we had before, we are much more clearly articulating a sequence of time, a progression of how this is evolving and changing. All right, one more. This version here has a sentence headline up at the top. The discrepancy in true magnitude reveals a lack of seismometers. And they've got some information about here an old earthquake, it looks like, and we're wondering something. There's some question here. So we've got a lot of visual elements. Maybe we can clean this up a little bit by starting to think about why they're all here. Why are all these three elements here? How are these pictures related to one another? And so we can move them around a little bit. And when we do that, I think we can also rephrase their sentence headline a little bit. We use scarp measurements to estimate the magnitude of earthquakes before there were seismometers. And so here we have this 1883 field notebook here, and we are zooming in on one picture. And that zoom in box allows us to show how these pictures relate to one another. If we're thinking about how we can communicate visually, we might want to go ahead and add in some diagrams here to indicate that we're measuring the offset. A ruler helps cue that measurement idea. And if we want to go really crazy, we can add even more information. It might be a little bit too much for one slide, but let me show you what I'm thinking of here. We can illustrate the entire process of how we get from the field all the way to the computer model. And we're using another visual element here, this little arrow right here. I like to think of this as kind of an input arrow. It shows everything on the left side being funneled into the stuff on the right side. And here we're saying that we're taking the offset as the input to a computer model, which tells us the magnitude is 7.7. And so, like I said, maybe a little bit too much for a slide, but what we're able to see is we're able to I feel like, get a really clearer picture of how each one of the visual elements on the page relate to one another and how they relate to the main message. And that's our story here, is that you should be really thoughtful about what the main message is of your slide and think about if there's some way that you can lay the elements out that help communicate that, even without worrying about any words or any of what actually is on the slide, just how it's laid out.